Okay, I was checking the list. I think that everybody's with us from Central or Eastern time zone, so it really is afternoon. Thank you guys so much for joining us today, and I hope that you have enjoyed this last section of the book. Um, a few of you I have unmuted as you came in and let you do a mic check. If you haven't been unmuted yet, then we can just do that mic check as as you want to contribute. Unless everybody just wants to go around and say a quick hello. If you really want to go around and say a quick hello to everyone, then raise your hand and we'll do that before we get started. I see 0 hands, so I'm going to assume that everyone is fine with just checking your mic as you get into the conversation. So again, thank you so much for joining us. This is Patricia Lovett at the National Center for Families Learning. I think I know everyone that's on, but in fairness to my colleagues who I will make introduce themselves, I'll give you just a quick intro. I'm a team leader for family learning here at NCFL, and I do a lot of work with our professional development for family learning partners such as yourselves. And that's why you hear my voice so very much on webinars and book discussions and in meetings when we have our national conference. I've been at NCFL about 4.5 years, a little over that, and had the privilege really to work with almost all of you as you have come into programming, which is very exciting. This is a large amount of my work, and although I work in other projects, family learning is definitely an exciting thing to get to see and to have seen kind of unfold over the years. So as I said, I'm the team leader for family learning, particularly with Toyota Family Learning. I have several colleagues joining both from the studio here at NCFL and around the office. So I'm going to give them all just a moment to introduce themselves as well. So in the studio with me today, I have Felicia Alfred.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Felicia Alfred, as Patricia said, and I am the Early Family Learning Specialist. Most of my work is primarily with FACES, which is the Native American program, and I have been with NCFL for just under 9 months now.
Great, and I'm very excited that you're in here with me today. Everyone gets tired of hearing my voice so much, so I'm sure that they appreciate you being here as well. Amanda, would you like to say a quick hello?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Amanda Evans. Like Felicia, I also work on the FACE program, the Family and Child Education Program. Let's see, I've also been here for just about 9 months. My previous experience was working as a Toyota family partner. I worked for Milwaukee Environmental Sciences Academy, where I did parent engagement, facilitated the family learning program, and my absolute love in life is family service learning. So I'm happy to share my knowledge with that, and very happy to talk about expeditionary learning today because the school I worked at was an EL school. So I'm excited to talk about it with everyone.
Great, thanks for joining. I don't want to skip over Adam, but sometimes he's really checking just for technical support. But Adam, do you hear us and want to say hello? Oh, he typed hello to everyone. Most of you have at least met Adam whenever you've had orientations. He is our technology manager here at NCFL and does a great job of making sure that things are going smoothly when we have sessions like this. So we really appreciate that. Andrea, I'm not sure if you have your audio connected. But I know that Angel does. Angel, would you like to say hello?
Hello, this is Angel here for assistance.
All right, thank you so much. So, so all of those people will be here to help make sure that things go smoothly and to engage in the conversation as well. So today we are on the third section of the book. Some of you I know have participated in all of the discussions, which is greatly appreciated, and hopefully you've really enjoyed the book. I know as the facilitator for these discussions, I've read it a few times through, and I really think that there is a lot. We picked this book because our partners work across age ranges and in different contexts, and there was really a lot here we felt like to take away, no matter what your context is, no matter what your focus area is. And hopefully you have felt that way as well. I do always share our mission, and this is a lot of why this book is so important as well. NCFL works to eradicate poverty through education solutions for families. And when we're reading about interventions that have been used largely with low-income families, and that do go beyond just this is what you could do in the classroom, that really gives an opportunity to make that work more robust. So the book that we've been reading, Helping Children Succeed, What Works and Why. Again, hopefully you've all enjoyed it. And we'd really like to hear from you just to get started. What were your big takeaways from this section of the book? Or if there was something just across the book as a whole as you were reflecting, what really stood out to you that you would like to share? And if you want to just raise your hand, if you want to speak, then we can make sure you're unmuted and everything. I know sometimes we need a minute to be able to kind of coordinate the technology. So while you're thinking about your answer, just to make sure everyone heard, what were your big takeaways from this section of the book or from the whole book? Anything that really stood out to you and you thought, yes, that's something we need to do in our program, or I'm so glad we're already doing that in our program. And remember, oh, there we go, Susan. If you want to start out, for others, remember if you raise your hand, then you may be muted, so I can unmute you. So Susan, I'm going to unmute you.
Hi, I'm Susan with Jefferson County Public Schools Adult Education. And I guess my big takeaway from the book was how, we understand how our adults are struggling in our community. And retention is that big core issue of how we keep them coming day in and day out. And I guess it came down to just wanting to make sure as I move forward with any meetings or PDs, talking about understanding the traumas that our families may be facing before entering our classroom, creating those environments, the environment within the classroom and the relationship building within that classroom to help engage our students. And then the pedagogy, rather with adults, is androgyny, are those strategies within the classroom, moving away from the 20th century thinking within a classroom of teacher-centered, and giving that power over to the students, because they need that part of our 21st century workforce. So that was, I guess, my big takeaway.
Great, thank you for sharing that. And I think that's really a place where family service learning has maybe helped to facilitate some of that kind of stepping away and giving students some control. Felicia, did you have a thought?
I did. Something I took away from the book was really looking at the children that we're working with and how poverty plays a role in how they do at school, their physical development and their mental development. We don't necessarily always think of children as having stress, But when they have adversity at home and how they bring it to school and how we help the parents work with the children to help alleviate some of their stress, and the teachers that are working with the young children, how are we helping them understand how to work with those families as well?
Sure. And I think that was really some of the coaching programs that were talked about, I thought were really interesting, taking an approach of working with the teachers, also having kind of those debriefs and looking at how are you handling stress. Particularly, there are some areas of education where it's very easy for teachers to get burnout. And I think that struck me as a way to kind of help them be stronger support for longer, so you don't lose those teachers that do really well at that. So I know there are several other people on the line with us today. I'd really love to hear any other big takeaways that others have, but I don't see any hands yet. So I'm going to share my biggest takeaway from this section was the focus on non-cognitive skills. I know we talk a lot about soft skills. We talk a lot about employability skills, 21st century skills, college and career readiness skills. These things all come in this same kind of package. And I think it was really affirming to me in reading how critical that is as a strong support for families and students in poverty, that we have made an intentional focus on working with you guys, providing professional development, creating resources like Learn to Earn Toolkit that really focus on those kinds of skills. That kind of, we know that we're doing that because it's based on research, but anytime you read that, it does kind of give you a shot in the arm that we're focusing on the right thing here, because that is what can create such a huge difference when we're talking about students continuing to be successful in their educational careers, as well as parents being able to get jobs. And I know a lot of times we talk with everyone, it's not just get that job, but keep the job. And a lot of times that non-cognitive skill area is what makes that big difference. So that's my big takeaway. Is there anyone else that wants to share what their takeaway was? Amanda, I think you should be able to unmute yourself.
There we go. Yeah, I just didn't want to interrupt you. My big takeaways, I'm with you actually. The last third of this book, it kind of spoke to me because this is a little bit of some of the experiences that I've personally gone through. And building of the relationships to me is one of the strongest foundational pieces, whether it's with the adults, with the kids, with the families as a whole. In order to move forward and in order to come from that strength-based approach, having those relationships established and really celebrating them, I think is of the utmost importance. And that's really what the end of this book was, to me, what was coming across from it. So I'm thoroughly enjoying this read, and I'm excited that this was the book you chose, Patricia.
Good. Oh, that makes me feel good. I'm glad that you're enjoying it. Hopefully everyone else has been as well. Dave, I see that you're with us and your hand is up. I'm going to unmute you. Welcome.
Yeah, first let me apologize for being late. I don't know why in my head I saw 2:30, but
you're fine.
Anyway, no, I mean, the latter half of the book was probably, I kind of wish I'd have jumped to the end at the beginning, but because those are the things we face. Like, it talks about, assessment and communicating and getting that mindset across. We just recently, and Patricia, I think you're familiar with some of the stuff that we're doing as far as trying to do, like, sort of, we would call it wraparound services for the parents. But that's sort of like a constantly evolving thing, because what we're understanding is that it's way more complicated than I think any of us ever thought. As far as like who your population is, what your population is going through, and how to like I have a message that I want to give to you, but then the question is like, how are you able to get it, or am I even giving it to you the right way? Am I presenting it the right way? Am I actually thinking about you as you, or am I thinking about you as I want you to be? So like when I'm telling you, you got to get up every day and make stuff happen. Well, in your mind, you're like, well, how do I do that? How do I get up and make stuff happen when I have this? I was just talking to a parent just the other day, and she was saying, I'm a single mother of 4 kids. How do I start a business? I mean, how can I be successful as a single mother of 4 kids? And my sort of idiotic response to it, after I said it, I realized that was that there are single mothers with more than 4 kids, and that's the side of me saying, okay, she's making excuses. Well, that's not an excuse for her. That's a reality for her, and I didn't even have the good sense to like recognize that that's a reality and speak to her from that point of view.
Sure, Dave. I think that's a really good point. I like the way that you phrase that. Am I thinking about you, or you as I think you should be, or I want you to be? That's hard to do. So
All right.
thanks for sharing that. Anybody else? Pacific?
Oh, hello. Hi.
Hi.
I guess my big takeaway from this was I liked the idea of creating an environment or a climate where the families feel a sense of belonging. And so I know that I've focused on that a lot with my families, because in order for them to succeed and for them to keep showing up to class and participating in class and not being afraid to participate in class is just, letting them know that I'm there for them, and that, I'm just creating an environment where they feel comfortable and they're not being judged.
Absolutely. And you do that really well. I get to see Pacific in action sometimes, and it is a very comforting classroom. I don't
Thank
see any other hands at the moment, and that actually kind of leads into the first kind of discussion question that I had, which really was thinking about relationships and the climate. What do you guys do in your programs, noting that relationships and comfortable environment are important? What do you do to help build relationships with the families in your programs? Dave?
Yeah, one of the things that I know that we do, and Monica and Vashti and Martin, all the team are like really good at, is that it's when the students come in, and even sometimes when they're like just during the course of the week, even after the days, on days when we're not even meeting with them, actually being concerned about or asking questions about stuff that they've talked about, like that's going on in their life. Like, if I walk in, because I don't get to go there as often as I would like to, but be there as often as I'd like to, but I'll remember like a conversation that I had with one of the students about something that was going on. And so when I walk in, one of my first questions is like, so how is that going? Or what happened with so and so? And sometimes it's surprise. I think at the beginning they were surprised that that you even remembered or cared. But I think that's important because I mean it is a family. It's like, and I've said this to you before, Patricia, is that we don't want like we don't want it to be just a program that people come to and then they move on to like whatever the next program is. But they feel like that we're family, we're friends, that we care about each other, we care about them, they care about us, we care about their kids, care about family members that aren't even in the program. Like if somebody's talking about their mother or their uncle or their cousin or their brother, you know, that's an extension of them. And so we should care about that as well. So I think we do a really good job of just making sure that we treat them not like program participants, but like family and friends.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. That remembering what's going on with someone and taking the time to ask, that makes such a difference in the way that everyone feels that environment. This is a place where we share and feel comfortable, and we know that someone really cares. That's big. And actually, I know, Dave, you didn't mention this, but I'm going to anyways. So at Amped, where Dave is, they also have, is banana the code word?
Yeah, yeah.
So if you say banana before you say something in parent time, everyone else knows that that's really to be treated confidentially. That's information that stays in the room. And I think that's something that seems to have really kind of helped build that comfort level among the families too, not just staff to families, but also family to family, so that they know, I can trust you. I can count on you being in this with me, which is pretty cool.
And
Diana,
I think to add to that,
sorry, yeah,
I'm sorry.
Dave.
No, just real quick, I'm sorry. I was like, just to add to that is just trying to like look at every participant or every person that's in your program as an individual, and recognizing their different personalities. So like if I walk into the room and there's somebody that I know that's in the room that's typically really upbeat or really, always, smiling or whatever, and I walk in the room and that person isn't, then that's something I need to like recognize. And it's happened before, like I walk in the room and I'll see somebody that I typically see like really seeming like everything is good, and I see it and they look like it's not. So, you might ask like, hey, are you okay? Is like everything good? And it kind of goes to that banana thing. It's like, well, they have the freedom to speak about whatever it is that's bothering them or that they're going through, whether it's related to the program or not related to the program, because they know that they can say it in confidence simply by saying the word banana prior to sharing that information with us.
Yeah, I think that's great. Diana, I see your hand. I'm going to unmute you.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Ashley Colazo. I'm the program facilitator
Ashley.
for NCFL. Hi there, how are you?
Good.
I think something that we have done that has kind of helped to forge relationships among the participants has been using ritual questions. It's something that we always kind of start workshop with, and it's adapted from the parenting journey curriculum, but essentially it's every question. We use 3, and every parent can choose one of the 3, but each one is targeted to have a parent think about a different aspect of their week, essentially. So what is it, something that you did well? What is something that you're really proud of this week? And so parents have the opportunity to each share something, whether that be something positive or something they feel might be an area of improvement. But the point is that everyone discloses every week. And so I think that cumulatively these kind of self-disclosure starts to build a sense of trust and camaraderie amongst the women. And so slowly, because of course it can be a little awkward in the first weeks, but certainly by the end, there's this very strong sense of safety and trust. And I think it really speaks to the tenet of social network for NCFL. And I think that towards the end, that's really strong for the women. And they have relationships that go outside of the program, and they'll, help each other with childcare or getting their children to school. And so it's really, really quite beautiful to see, actually. So I think that's something that's been helpful, is to kind of just have something that is consistent every week that encourages them to share difficult things that they want to celebrate. And so that isn't something that we use that's been strong.
That's great. Thanks, Ashley.
No
and
problem.
did you say ritual questions? Is that how you?
Yeah, ritual questions, because we'll do it every week. Mm-hmm.
Cool. When I saw your hand go up, I thought it was Diana, and I was actually waiting to see if what she was going to share was when I was working with Eastside House. The first time I went for a site visit, I did kind of a parent interview, and so I was talking to a couple of moms, and just asking questions. How's the program going? What do you like about it? And one of these moms in the program said that it was so important to her that Diana reached out every single week. She would call every week and say, you know, hey, we've got class this week. Make sure you're going to be there. We're real excited to see you. And this one mom said that it got to the point where her husband would say, I bet it's Diana again whenever her phone would ring. But it made her feel so special because she was getting a personal phone call every week to remind her to come to the program.
Yeah, so that's something we definitely continue to do, and it adds that personal touch and lets them know that they're being thought of, and that we really want for them to be there and participate, and we're excited to have them there. So I think that reach out and one-on-one communication is also really helpful.
Sure, and I think that goes back to at the beginning, Susan, you were sharing about how important retention is, and I think that's a big part of it, is that relationship and that environment. If it is welcoming, people will feel more welcome to come back. Pacific, I see your hand.
Everyone pretty much, said the same thing, but I was thinking just simply being there for them outside of the academic aspect and just remembering to check up on them. Like a super short story that I have is a couple of my students received eviction notices on their doors, and they don't speak English very well, so they didn't know what was going on. And luckily, since I speak their language, I was able to translate and tell them what was going on, and then I had to contact their social workers, and then they had to contact them. So it was like a process. But even after that happened, a couple weeks afterwards, I called them and I was like, hey, how's it going? Like, what's going on? And they were able to tell me, oh, everything is taken care of. Like, we're not being evicted. And, just stuff like that, just building trust with them and just remembering to check up on them. And, everything doesn't always have to be about learning English and school.
Great. I think that's a very good point. I don't see any other hands at the moment. So another thing that occurred, that really kind of caught my attention reading through was there was an area that really focused on this study by Kirabo Jackson in North Carolina, looking at non-cognitive abilities, and he pulled out some specific measures: attendance, suspensions, on-time grade progression, and overall GPA as kind of the proxy measure that if you look back at that kind of that report about that study, he specifically said this is really these four indicators together were a stronger predictor of future success than the standardized test was. And that's really helpful to kind of think about, because a lot of times people do stress about tests. And so what I wonder is, when you think about parents in the program, if you consider these areas, how do you help, or how can you, if maybe that's not an area you thought of before reading this this section, although I think it probably is, but how do you help parents understand how to support their children in these ways, and also how do you help them know what it means and if their child is on target? So when we're looking at things like attendance, and I know suspensions are kind of a different area, but GPA, on-time grade progression, how do you help parents understand where their child really probably should fall to be successful? And how do you help them make that happen? How do they take that from parent time to pack time and home? Amanda, I think you had something to share. I see your hand.
Yeah, so Patricia, what we used to do during parent time was invite the classroom teachers of the students that the parents had, and they would come in and talk about the different scores, what they looked like, what they meant, how they compared nationally, and how they compared within their own classroom. We also created data walls so that the parents could see physically, like walk up and take the number that their child has and see where it falls on that continuum. That really helped to paint a picture. When it came to attendance, instead of putting it in terms of days missed, we used to put it in terms of hours missed. So instead of saying to a parent, your child has missed 2 days of school, we would say your child has missed almost 16 hours of education. And that bigger number tended to grab a lot more attention, and it helped getting kids back into school who were chronic absentees.
Well, that's a great idea. I wouldn't have thought of the hours, but especially, when you're thinking parents knowing that they need a certain number of hours to test for the next level and things like that, that makes a lot of sense. And sometimes even I've found just in a parent engagement direction, even sometimes just specifically focusing on how important it is to be in school can be a pretty big conversation. I was a school translator a while before I came to NCFL, but truancy conferences were one of the biggest frustration points for me as a translator, because I had to meet with the truancy officer and families, and a lot of times families that were newer, maybe just hadn't been as reachable. By the time that they come in for a truancy conference, it really is surprising sometimes that, for one, it's required that your child is actually here, and for two, this is how much is really missed when you're looking at 5 or 6 days. These are all of the things that your child isn't getting. And then when we look at how that correlates to their overall GPA, when we look at how that correlates to maybe even not a suspension, but behavior that would lead to a suspension because of frustration in the classroom, it's a little easier to see that when you're really digging into how those absences are important, how they affect that child. Susan, I see your hand.
Yes, with Pact and Parenting, we would talk about sleep patterns and nutrition and how all that impacts good health, physical health, mental health, so you're ready to come to school prepared for the day. And again, piggybacking on what you're saying, the importance of attendance, but also being tied in with the truancy folks if some of our parents needed that. Because again, as you said, sometimes they don't realize what is being lost by not being in school, because maybe something's culturally is happening and they're just used to not sending them to school then. But also talking within parenting about parent-teacher conferences and reiterating what an earlier person said, how to read the report cards, tying them in JCPS, we have something called Infinite Campus, so they could see in real time what their children are doing and how they're faring in class, as well as just getting a basic email. For some of our higher performing ESL students, they can write to their teachers in their native language and translate it out. So for a couple of our parents, that has been huge to open up some doors to have that communication with home and school. But if you don't have an email, you can't have that engagement because you might not be dropping your child off each day at school because they get on the bus. So just those parent-pact connections and listening to what the families need as well in order to help with that school success.
Sure, I think that's really important, and that connection, emphasizing that word, is so important. What you're doing in parent time should be connecting to pact time. It should be transferring to home and beyond, because that's, you know, they're only in your program for so long, and that's the real goal, is that families are stronger forever, not for the duration of a program.
Yeah.
Thanks, Susan. I don't see any other hands.
Hey, Patricia, if I could, can I just add in one more thing? I was thinking about it, and another way that we used to kind of put it in terms for parents to understand what their children are actually missing is we would ask them to reflect back on a lesson that maybe they had missed out on in school. Like, for example, maybe adding and subtracting decimals together and how that has impacted them in their life later on. So for, you know, you're at the grocery store and you're not exactly sure how much change you should be getting back. We used to use that example, and a lot of parents it drove it home for them. Like, yeah, it's a missed day of school, but there's a lot of lifelong lessons that are being missed as well.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. I know when I was teaching Spanish, my students always, at first at least, would be very frustrated. The only way you could earn your participation points if you missed school, and you got participation points every day. So if you missed a week, that was a chunk out of that part of your grade. The only way you could get the points back is if you stayed after school with me. So I stayed after school a lot, but I had students who over time, it would drive it home for them and for their parents, because sometimes there would be parents that, you know, we had to work through this. Why is it important for your child to stay? Well, because they missed something important. They didn't just miss a day of my class. They missed the conversations that happened around what we were learning. They missed the opportunity to practice with their peers. And that's something they can't get back from me just sending a worksheet home. And so the only way that they can make that up is really to make it up. And I think that's a great way to get parents to kind of think back and pull from their memory. What do you think you might have missed out on? Thanks for sharing that, Amanda. So I don't see any other hands on that. Let's kind of switch a little bit. This is related to thinking about the environment, but the book specifically talks about the heightened fight or flight instinct that children experience, and I would think it's possible, and actually I'm curious from you, do you notice the effects of that heightened fight or flight instinct with your parents in your program also? And if you do, how do you work through that to make them more, to make that feeling that they belong more possible for them? Dave? Dave, I think you're muted still.
Okay, sorry about that.
There you go.
No, I was saying we see that far more than I expected to, and certainly far more than we hoped that we would. I mean, expected that we would, but it's difficult because I mean we've had some pretty extreme, like at least two really I feel like extreme cases of that, where no matter what you did or what you told this person, or you know however you dealt with it, it was just, you know, we even to the point that we said, you know, if you're interested, you know, let's maybe seek out some sort of counseling for you, because it was that embedded in everything that they did. So it was like there was nothing you could do, nothing you could tell them. So I mean, we see it, but I don't think we've yet figured out how to like combat it. And I don't know if the time that we have with the families is even close to enough to even put a dent in it. I mean, I hope that it does something. But the two cases that I'm thinking of, it was so extreme that they, like at least one of the ladies almost couldn't even function, because everything, it was like daily. You know, you were trying to, you know, reinforce this sense of belonging, and that we're here for you, and that, it was just so much that we just we didn't know what to do.
Wow. And I think that is, I think that you make a good point there, that, the time in a program may not be enough really to dig very deep with that. And I think looking for another avenue in the community is a great idea. Were you able to find a partner in the community, or were they not interested in?
No, yeah, we were able to find, because it just so happens that one of our students in AMPT, their father is a counselor. And so I reached out to him because I of course, didn't want him to do the counseling, but I reached out to him for resources that we could use that would, sort of be separated from the program itself to do the counseling. And the person agreed to do the counseling, but then it was odd was that the first counselor we sent them to was actually at U of L, and they didn't trust it. They were like, well, no, that person can't be legitimate. I'm like, well, how is it not legitimate? It's a university. How is it not legitimate? And they made up all these reasons why they felt that way. And so I mean, I don't know what it is they thought, but yeah. So we were able to find research. We have a relationship now with a couple of different agencies, to refer folks to counseling. But this particular person, I can't even say at this point where they're at. I mean, the last time we actually spoke with them is a person in one of our first cohorts. The last time I saw her, she had lost weight, and we still speak to her. We still in communication, so that's a good thing. But she's losing weight, and I mean, I just don't know where it's going.
Sure, that's difficult to experience, but I'm glad that you were able to find some partners in the community, because there is a lot of that opportunity when families are living in trauma and can't escape it.
Hmm.
I think we talked about that in the first of these discussions. There's a difference from PTSD, which follows something traumatic that is kind of an isolated event, or something that at least is finite, versus living in trauma every day. And that's a very difficult situation, and it does take a lot of counseling intervention. So I'm glad that you have found some partners, to be able to do that long term. Susan?
Um, I've been both a classroom teacher and a coordinator. And just to go with what Dave is saying, some students are just not ready to because of whatever underlying needs. But they hear you. They hear that commitment, the caring. So hopefully that student will circle back. I've had students over a 10-year period where suddenly they'll reach out to me, how can I get my GED? And so, hang in there. But here's the important part is being careful of ourselves, that there is such, thing as that secondary trauma. We are working so hard to capture these students that it breaks our hearts. So making sure we do some self-care ourselves, but we know that we're planting the seeds. We may not reach everyone, which is heartbreaking because we know how much we can help, but just keeping those lines of communication open and knowing that they have somebody to reach out to in the community is huge.
Absolutely. I think that's a good point, and a good point about the self-care part of that, because it, just like I was saying earlier about the coaching, those studies, there is a lot of opportunity for burnout and being overwhelmed when you're working with families that are overwhelmed themselves. And it is important to be able to take those times to debrief in a constructive way, and to make sure you're taking care of yourself in that instance. I don't see other hands here. And so actually, I want to kind of shift the conversation a little bit. The book doesn't specifically talk about service learning or family service learning, but they come so close. And that's a big part of why we wanted to use this book, because there is this focus on autonomy and there's this focus on competence and belonging, and these are all things that are great opportunities through family service learning. But as the book talks about the need to increase autonomy for students, the programs that were mentioned, some of them specifically said it was difficult to give up that level of control. And this is something that we have noted and heard specifically from some of our partners about implementing family service learning, that it can be difficult to encourage that level of autonomy and to kind of give up some of the control. So I'm curious, and certainly I'm sure others on the call would be as well. How do your teams work to kind of give up some of that control to families and to give them the opportunity to build their autonomy? Kamara, I know that I know you're on with us. I know sometimes your audio gives you a little bit of difficulty, but if I'm going to unmute you, and if you are able to get yours to go, I'd be interested to hear. Well, I guess I already know, but I would be interested for you to share with others kind of what your journey at Broward has been on this autonomy issue, because I know we've discussed it recently.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Kimara from Broward, coordinator with Family Literacy here. Our students initially in year one, we were as staff petrified to have our students, parents, our adult students and parents to actually engage in service learning beyond what we could actually control, simply because in the school district we have so many guidelines and parameters that we as staff must follow. Political issues, immigration issues, legal issues, and that tends to be much of what plagues our students and families here. And many of our students are undocumented, to say it lightly, or their status has expired. So much of the exposure for us, at least, we really didn't want to set our students free to really discuss issues in their communities that impacted them the most. However, as we began to work with our students and really look at what issues directly impacted them as family members and their children as it relates to their success academically and in terms of their career success, we realized that much of their issues are very everyday, similar issues that we all come across and that we all feel that we must have addressed. And we also realized with the literacy level, very low literacy level of our students, we were a bit unsure as to how they would be able to communicate in terms of among themselves as well as in their communities. And as they grew in terms of their academic achievement and as they began to build more trust with us, we realized that over time, the fears that we initially had were not as inflamed or as difficult as we thought. And our families, amazingly enough, regardless of their status, they viewed themselves quite differently. These were issues that plagued them that they did in fact need to have addressed in order for them to move forward. There was a greater risk for them not to have their issues addressed than to sit quietly under the table, for lack of a better phrase. And as their skills increased and as the network, as our sites became safe haven, and as we learned more about how to implement this program is in terms of service learning, our students grabbed hold of us and led us at certain points. Now we're in our third year, and our students, brand new students, because of the reputation and the communication that goes on among the community and students as they refer other families to us, they realize that it is part of every day. And if they want to resolve issues that they are impacting, this is the place to come. And they come ready and prepared to actually engage and accept it more wholeheartedly and realize the connection of the academics that they're learning in class, they actually get to apply it and they become more empowered. And from this evolution of our little community in Broward County, we're very large, but in our little community in providing service learning, we realize that we learned over time that what we superimposed over our students and our families really needed to take a back seat, and we should allow our students to express and be free enough to feel they understand where their parameters are, they understand what the school district is trying to provide, and the limits that we were trying to superimpose upon them, they blended into something very beautiful as they communicated over time, where many of our students who are not necessarily Toyota participants actually engage and apply their skills as well. And I find that it's actually a must. If we want our students to move beyond the academic classroom, they must first go through these service learning projects to step out into the world of work and career. It's part of regular business now for us.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
That has been a bit of a dance, and I know a lot of you have done that same dance. Kamara and I had literally just talked maybe a week or so ago about that, and it takes time to be able to be comfortable with it. But I think across the board, we've really seen as families get that opportunity to have more autonomy. We've seen the types of projects change, and that's really an exciting thing to see, because the level of engagement of those families increases significantly when it's a project that they're really interested in and want to see happen. Having opportunities that are kind of more entry level are great, and they get people to have that taste of civic mindedness. But when you go beyond, and like Kamara said, give them a chance to really think about what plagues them on a daily basis, what they really want to see changed. You may not see an instant opportunity for a grocery store in a food desert, but you do see a chance for families to engage that process and understand what it looks like and to make a dent. And sometimes that can be every bit as powerful, and honestly, sometimes more deeply connected for them than collecting items for a drive in town, for example, or passing out information that they've collected from programming, which is great. It's simply a shift in the level of their engagement with the project. So I appreciate you sharing that. I don't see any other hands on this one, so I'm going to move to a different question that I had, and we'll let other people jump in before Amanda jumps in on this. So I know it wasn't just me that was excited to read about expeditionary learning in the book, because one of our partners through Toyota Family Learning is an expeditionary learning school, and actually Amanda joined us from that school, as she mentioned earlier. When they implemented family service learning, it was really a natural fit because the students were already engaging in rigorous projects. So the book talks some about how these projects they're very long term. There are lots of revisions and lots of kind of digging into the projects. So when you're thinking about family service learning, are there challenges that you experience in making projects that rigorous with the families? And if there are challenges you want to share, if there are ways you have found that are successful at addressing those, we'd love to hear. Otherwise, there may be others on the call that have had a similar challenge and have thoughts around that. So when we're thinking about making those projects rigorous, what challenges are there for that? Okay, Amanda, I'll let you start us out here because I know you through EL you were already working with the kids on projects. Did you guys experience challenges in being that rigorous with the whole family?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The biggest challenge, and we got a lot of help from the kids, was the parents. Really, they understood the importance of the deep diving and why we should be doing it, but it was the kids who would come in and convince them like, hey, yeah, we really do understand now what it's, for example, they did a farm to fridge unit for the kids. We understand what food is now, where it comes from, how it's made, how it gets to me. And I've seen a lot of people in our community that don't have food. How can we help out? This is what I learned, Mom. What can you learn and help me to understand even more about? So, sometimes it's that little apprehension of I'm not the expert, so I don't know if I can do this. And the kids coming in and pushing their parents saying, no, we did it. You can do it too. That always helped out a lot. But yeah, that was definitely one of the biggest upfront challenges was parents recognizing that although I don't know everything, I do know, and I know how to find out answers, and I can share that with other families, and I can become the expert. That was, I think, our number one big challenge. Sure. I'm curious to hear what other sites are having parents, what their challenges are.
Thanks for sharing that, Amanda. I am too, but I don't see any hands yet. I think people are just thinking.
I suppose one more challenge that parents had initially was that whole learning to work together. We all have our individual strengths, but how do we come together as a team? And that kind of bounces back to some of the employability skills that I know we look at on that CTE framework, but really kind of boiling it down into manageable chunks. And as the facilitator, just facilitating and not jumping in and saying, well, this is how you do it. There was some challenges with that as well. But, parents worked at it. They figured it out, trial and error for some. Others did a little bit of research. So it was an interesting experience to kind of step back and watch and see how families came together to overcome those obstacles.
So did you use any facilitation strategies with them specifically around working together as a team?
That's a good question.
Like when that came up as a challenge?
I'm sorry, say that last part again.
Sorry, like when that came up as a challenge, did you address that in parent time or pack time maybe?
Yeah, we would do that. We would remind the parents, like, look, there's a structure that we utilize here in parent time. What is it? And they would kind of think back to the classes that they had and go, okay, well, this is the first step that you guys always do. This is the second step you guys always do. And then we talked about, well, how do we arrive at those? Do you think we just pull them out of thin air, or where does that come from? And, the parents kind of came to the conclusion, oh, well, you have conversations about it. Right. Okay. So what conversations do you want to have around this particular topic? And then we'd pull out the chart paper, and everybody would sit down and kind of break off into groups, and they would come together as a whole group and share out. And they went about it in a very democratic way. They really loved to vote.
Cool. Yeah, and your group actually, while you were still there, they, I don't see hands right now, so I'm going to let you share if you want to about their, maybe kind of from this lens about their voter registration project.
Oh yeah.
Kind of how they were able to work through challenges and things.
So that was an interesting project because that particular year we had a cohort of parents that had actually come from the first year of programming. So they were very familiar with how family service learning worked and kind of what the steps were and, what projects should look like. And then we had the new cohort who was kind of unsure, but they were excited to participate in it. And one of the newer parents was in law school, and he mentioned, there's an election coming up. The school was covering the election. The kids were all talking about it. And so the parents were interested, and everybody wanted to kind of do something around the election. So this student who was in law school was a former voter registrar. So he had found out about classes in the area and just kind of got a whole bunch of parents together, and they all went. And they came back from the class and they decided then and there that, yes, this is going to be our service project. We want to take on voter registration in Milwaukee. I don't remember what the percentages were, but they were very low from what they had been shown, and how participation in Milwaukee was very limited when it came to voting. So they were bound and determined to get some of the other parents and community members together. So they started looking at, all right, well, what are the different pieces that we need in order to make this a successful registration? Well, first and foremost, we need people to show up. So when's a good time? When do people come into the building? And conveniently enough, we actually had a parent-teacher conference that was going to be happening around that time. So they decided, well, the building's already going to be open, the staff's going to be here, so security will be safe, everybody will be on the same page. We all know that this is a learning environment. So then they moved on to decide, well, how do we want to get this out? And, there was conversation around, well, I want to go on social media and I want to make electronic flyers. And a little bit of arguing happened, but, not necessarily arguing, I shouldn't say that. Or more of a constructive discussion about what they wanted to accomplish and how they wanted to get that message out. And again, the chart paper came out and some voting took place. They actually brought it to the kids to see how the kids wanted to handle it. The kids were all gung-ho about using some social media, telling their friends through text messaging and Snapchat. It was adorable. The parents opted to go down the route of flyers primarily. We sent home a weekly newsletter as a school. And so anything and everything that they made, we attached it to all of our newsletters. And also, we taught them how to use the automated dial service that the school used. So they came up with their own script. They had an editing process that they created amongst themselves. Went through several editings. They printed up their final paper, and then we did a few runs on the call, got the message out, and it was a pretty successful night. They signed up, I believe it was 20 parents got signed up to vote, and they passed information out to over 60 families. So they made an impact in our community, and it was all, again, through conversation and kind of taking a look at how do we want to accomplish this and how are we going to determine what's the best way to move forward.
Great, thanks for sharing that. When you said they voted, it clicked in my head automatically. But I think you shared a lot of really great opportunities to see how they were building their autonomy as well. You didn't use the dial system for them. You taught them how to do it so that they could take ownership of that. That kind of opportunity is that's really helpful for families, and it does build beyond the autonomy that creates a sense of belonging. I must belong here because they're willing to trust me to do this, to send out messages to everyone. That's big. Susan, I see your hand.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate with from Broward County that yes, the support that the parents would get with the kids after that first project really gives that impetus to try other ones. But what I usually find at the start of the school year, the biggest challenge we have is the parents, for lack of a better term, like the pie in the sky dreams, and how to whittle it down to something more manageable that they can actually be successful at. Because there are sometimes financial supports that are needed and fundraising that may need to be done. There may be, as was said earlier, barriers because our program is within a school district, so there's certain challenges that we face that we have to watch. Like they wanted to craft a fundraiser for the hurricane victims at the start of the school year, but they wanted to cook in their own kitchens and they were going to collect the money on their own. And that just, there were so many barriers to what they wanted to do. It was a lot to work through and think about. So it's making those projects in more bite-sized pieces is probably the biggest challenge.
Sure. And I think one thing that we talk a lot about here with that is doing kind of just-in-time teaching. Something comes up in the process of working on a project. Sometimes there are things that families might need to work on right now to be able to do that next step.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to address that. Thanks, Susan. So I noticed that there are a few people who haven't raised their hands, and I want to make sure everyone feels like they have an opportunity to speak. So if you haven't contributed and you have things that you want to share about kind of how you're working to make projects more rigorous for families, if you want to raise your hand, or I think maybe a couple of people might be connected, like just called into the number and didn't connect through the system for audio. So I want to pause just a minute, and if you are out there and you have things to share, you can feel free to just do that. I'll just leave open air here for a second. Okay. I know sometimes people will get the messages afterwards that say, sorry, we missed you. And they'll say, I was there, I was on the phone. So I'm trying to make a more concerted effort to catch people in that way if you're with us. So if you're with us like that and I'm talking, you can still feel free to just interrupt me. No one else will be sad if you do, I'm sure. So, so thinking still about project-based learning, about family service learning, the book talks not a whole lot, just a little bit about skeptics of project-based learning and the idea that that really can become kind of the empty calories of education if it's not well planned. And I'd like to know a little bit of your feelings about that, and if you've had times where maybe it feels like it's easy to go that direction in programming with family service learning, so that when we talk about having a rigorous project, do you think that there are particular areas that make it kind of easy to slide into less rigorous projects? Or even if there's support that you can think of that that maybe NCFL could provide to help make sure that we're not falling into that kind of empty calories idea of learning opportunities. So sorry, sometimes I don't read the questions the way that I actually write them. Let me try asking that the way I have it on paper so that maybe it's clearer. The book makes an interesting point from skeptics of project-based learning that project-based learning can easily become the empty calories of education if it's not well planned. What are your feelings about that point, noting that family service learning really is a type of project-based learning? So when we think about the possibility of project-based learning coming across as empty calories of education, coming across as not effective, what are your feelings about that idea? Dave?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm a a proponent. I mean a proponent. I enjoy project-based learning, and that's sort of my thing. Is that I feel like when you do something in terms like you do it in a sort of a project, that's the opportunity for people to put hands on every part of that learning. Um, so it just seems like it makes sense to me. Like people can connect if there's an end goal. If we start here and we end up here, then if they really want to learn, that's to me like sort of the best way to learn. I'm not a fan of just talking to people or going into a situation like say a program where you just give people a bunch of information and then you send them on their way. I mean, to get them to participate and take part in every step of of the project is sort of the thing that I think helps them to like connect more, to learn more. And I guess the thing is it can become empty calories if you like in some cases where you talked about earlier where you got them working on it and then you always jump in and you basically feeding them ideas and you're telling them how to do this as opposed to stepping back. And it's difficult to do that, to step back and say, okay, this is on you to get this done or to complete this project. Then I think it can become, as you say, empty calories because basically it's not them doing anything, it's you like as if like as if they're children, you're guiding them through and handing them here, take this and walk it over there, to pick this up and move it. You know what I mean? It's like it's got to be done properly and really with a lot of like hands off approach, sort of, I guess. You give them the resources they need and then step back and then allow them to and give them ownership, give them the permission to move forward. Like somebody said earlier, where they taught them how to use what was it, the phone bank or I can't remember exactly what they said, but taught them how to use this particular resource and then stepped back and allowed them or gave them permission to use it.
Right. Yeah, it's like you probably get those from your daughter's school, Dave, the like robo dials where it sends the same message out to all the parents.
Right. Yep.
So yeah, giving parents the opportunity to use that system is pretty big because it goes to everybody.
Right. Yeah, and that gives them a sense of power. It's like they realize an ownership of the thing because you trust me enough and you believe in me enough and you feel like I have the ability to do this thing. And I think that that works because not only do they learn that thing or learn how to use that, but they also socially and emotionally they learn they're stronger, they're better because they now know that somebody has confidence in them and they now have more confidence in themselves.
Absolutely. Does anybody else have thoughts about that? About project-based learning kind of being an opportunity for empty calories? I'm also curious in connection with this question. I think everybody that's on today has received the Family Service Learning poster kit that we put together. And we did that kind of based on some things that we had been rolling around in the office already, in conjunction with your feedback from the meeting we had during our conference last year. And I'm curious if any parts of that, if you've started using the posters yet, if any parts of that are maybe helping to increase the focus on learning so that it is a more substantial, so that there are more substantial outcomes from the projects you're doing. I hope that that's not an indication that no one's using them. I know it's not an indication. I've seen pictures from you guys that you're using the posters, which is great. Has anyone seen a change as far as implementing a project? I know some of you have just received them pretty recently. Okay, then we'll hope to hear more. Maybe your technical assistance coaches will check in about that on your next monthly calls. I do know that we've seen pictures of them being used. If you have questions as you're working to focus on those learning outcomes, absolutely make sure that you're asking that. I know this is me being more professional development-y than book discussion facilitator, but because it is a part of this conversation, I always want to make sure that you're very clear. Our job is to make sure that you have the most successful program that's possible and that families are getting the biggest benefit they can. So please never be nervous to talk to your technical assistance coach. If you feel like there is a possibility that family service learning for you just needs kind of a stronger focus, talk to us and let us try to brainstorm that with you. We really want to see and do see over time family service learning becoming deeper learning with families, and that's really the goal. And so so I just say that because I know sometimes it can seem intimidating to pick up the phone or to email your technical assistant, even if you have a close relationship with them, and say, you know, I'm just really having trouble with this. So so I just like to mention that that's it's not something to be nervous of. Amanda, did you want to share maybe a little bit about how the FACE programs, and if you want to give the 30-second overview of what FACE is, but if you want to talk a little bit about how you're working with those programs around making projects more rigorous, we've got a second.
Sure, I can do that real quick. So for those who are not familiar, FACE is the Family and Child Education Program. It's run through the Bureau of Indian Education. It's taking place on over 40 reservations across the country. It's in, let me see, 7 states right now. FACE is in their second year of doing family service learning. This is their pilot. 3 sites completed projects last year, and we have another 3 who are actively working this year. They received their posters a couple weeks ago. The posters have been put up in classrooms, and the way that the facilitators have been talking about using them is bringing out the poster that's appropriate to the step that they're on, as well as the next step that's upcoming. So taking a look at what do we need to be thinking about and talking about now as a group, and using some of those questions and tips as a conversation starter that's on the posters. And then also thinking about, okay, this is where we are and this is where we're going to be going next. So is there anything maybe that we can start thinking about now to help make that transition to the next step a little bit easier, or kind of hedge some things off that maybe there was a problem that might be coming up we didn't think about, but now that we're looking at this next step, like that might be something we want to talk about as a group. And then using that dry erase board to kind of keep track of their thoughts, as well as any other means to kind of track and communicate. One site is specifically just kind of writing notes down on a notepad keeping it out on the table. So if anybody has a question, they can throw it on there, or a thought, and then it can be talked about later on. Another site is they're big on texting with one another. So they created a group chat and they're talking that way. So again, the posters are just kind of being used as a way for the facilitator to get a conversation started, and then know those, as you called them, Patricia, those, just teach now moments, and addressing what's being talked about right then and there, as well as planning and bringing in resources for the next day that might help with furthering the project along.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, Amanda. It's very exciting that so many people are using the posters. I know it probably isn't quite as exciting on y'all's end, but that was a big undertaking here, because you each only know the set that you have, but in the office there were 4 different versions, and some of them are English only and some are bilingual, and so it actually was a lot of sorting and reviewing files and reviewing files. So thank you for sharing how those are being used, Amanda. If you have questions about how to integrate that kind of thing into your program, like I said, please just ask. We are close to the end of the time here, so I'm not going to pose any more questions, except, is there anything else that that anyone had as a takeaway, an aha, just something you want to share about this book or this section of the book? I don't see any other hands, so so I think we're probably at the end of discussion here today. I really appreciate you guys joining us, and those of you who have engaged the conversation here today. I know this has been a really helpful book for me, as far as even having different perspective for working with you guys as our partners, and I really hope that it has been beneficial for you as you're working with families also. I do know that I think one program reached out to me and said that you guys are doing an internal book study now on this book, which was exciting. But I also wanted to point out what our friends at Adelante Mujeres were doing. They actually were doing parent time sessions based on the different concepts that they read about in the book. So thinking about attachment, serve and return conversations. And that's really kind of the big idea. When we have information and research that benefits families, the more that you are able to share that with the parents directly and help them translate that into use with their children, the better service you're really providing them. Anytime that you have access to research about something that can make a huge difference for their child, that's the benefit of coming to Parent Time. And so it doesn't always have to be that, a 2-hour session is about serve and return conversations. You could do a very small section of Parent Time about something that you've read, about an article that you've checked out, about something that comes out in NCFL's News of the Week, things like that, and still have the rest of content around something else. But I always think it's important for us to remember, when we have great information that can be beneficial to families, we need to share it with them. And so I hope that you're doing that as you're digging into this content. I really appreciate you all being with us today and participating. I always wrap up PowerPoints with a reminder about our annual conference, and I'm very excited to say that I know some of you have been probably sitting on your hands wanting to register and start booking travel to Fort Lauderdale, especially as I'm pretty sure it's supposed to snow in Louisville tomorrow. So I'm sure that some of us are thinking, let's go to Fort Lauderdale. You should be getting information from your program contacts at NCFL in the next couple of weeks about registration for the conference, as well as for those of you who do travel to the conference under support from your program. That information should be coming soon as well. And we'll work on getting everyone squared away for that. So make sure, if you haven't been thinking about who is going from your organizations, that you're starting to have those conversations, because we would love to see you all in Fort Lauderdale. Our conference planning team has done a great job of picking the location this year, and it's going to be a really good experience. So we will be in contact very soon with more details about getting registered and getting set up. And I know some of you have submitted proposals for sessions, and I'm just going to say right now that I don't even know what has gone out. That's not my area of expertise, so I'm not sure if people know who has been accepted and things like that. But I would imagine that will be coming out soon if you haven't gotten those notifications as well. So aside from that, I think everyone has my contact information, but just in case, if you have questions about the book, have questions about the book discussions, or just want to say hey, you are welcome to reach out to me. My contact information is here on the screen. And that's all we have for today. Thank you all so much, and have a great weekend.